All right, let's get started, guys. The world against NAR. That's what it feels like. I feel like everyone and everyone on top of that is going up against NAR. NAR's, I feel like is. Do you think they're getting a little tired and they're just pushing things off to the side just to focus on the things that are really important? What's
Well,
happening?
that's kind of the word that we get, and I was thinking this afternoon, John Riley and I've got this history with NAR. I was thinking we knew Bud Smith, and then we knew and worked with Bud on the launch of Realtor.com, and then we knew Daryl Stinton, and we worked with Daryl Stinton on the launch of the new models document and NERDS numbers, and then we knew Bob Goldberg, and we worked with Bob Goldberg on the launch of ePro, and
Yes,
we
remember that.
yeah, and Nakia Wright, I guess the new CEO, we don't have any experience with her, but I read some things and heard some things where it sounds like that's exactly what she's going to be focusing on, some different things. And one thing that uh, was not a surprise, but kind of a surprise that they're going to focus on, and they probably really need to, is the NAR three-way agreement,
Yeah.
right? Because what you hear is sometimes people are dissatisfied with NAR, right or wrong. And I'm an NAR, I'm a realtor emeritus, 40 years, so an advocate for NAR. But they say, look at all this stuff's been going on. We don't like NAR. We want to break away from NAR. We don't want to have anything to do with NAR. But the fact is that you can't break away from NAR without breaking away from your state and local, because
Okay.
there's something called the three-way agreement. And the three-way agreement says when you join the realtor family, the realtor organization, you join at the local level. The local level collects the dues, but you also join at the state and national. You can't just say, I want to belong to my local association of realtors and I don't want to belong to NAR. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Join, you have to belong to all three. And it seems like she's going to defend the three-way agreement. I don't know who's going after it, but I've always thought that that was kind of a questionable tying kind of arrangement. Very successful, very good for realtors and for organized real estate, but I could see that could be a target. So she's going to step forward, it seems, and defend that to people that might be against the three-way agreement. Also, going and looking for outside counsel. They didn't name who that might be for to kind of head off some of the antitrust issues ahead of time. And maybe that means less emphasis on other things, Tristan, to get back to your point.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Saul, the three-way agreement, and they're not going to be successful with separating that, but they have been successful with the MLS access. They have been able to separate the MLS from the association in certain states and maybe now, nationally. So they have accomplished the MLS decoupling, but they haven't been able to do it with a three-way agreement because it's the name Realtor,
Can
which
you
is a
expand on
trademark name.
the three-way agreement, guys, so that it's clear to everyone listening in? What is it? Why was it started? What's
Yeah.
happening?
So think about the term realtor, and you know that you got to use it a certain way. If you use it the wrong way, you're going to get penalized if people catch you. So think of the term realtor as kind of like a franchise.
Okay.
And then that's at the national level, and NAR owns the trademark, owns the registered mark, owns realtor and the big blue R, and right, different um, expressions of the term realtor. And then there are state franchises, they're like the state associations. Then there are local franchises, and they get charters locally, charters from NAR to be the realtor organization. So the three-way agreement is an agreement that says between NAR, state, and locals that say that you cannot be a member of one without the other two. So it's a three-way agreement. You can't
Interesting.
join your local associate. When you join your local, you also automatically are joining the state and the national, even though these are all separate corporate entities, right? So NAR is a separate corporation. Your state association, in our case, CAR, the California Association of Realtors, that's a separate corporate entity.
What
My
do you
local
what do you
association,
think of that overall?
what was that?
What do you think of that? Do you think it should be taken off? Do you think it should be something that we could choose to do separately, or is it simplifying the process?
Well,
So,
for me, I think it's very helpful because it gives us more of a unified presence when we lobby, right? All behind this one term makes it easier because the local collects the dues and then the local pays the state and pays the national their portion. So it's three, I belong to three separate realtor organizations. And while people would like to have choice, if they did, my guess is most people would belong at the local level and not belong at the state or national level.
I agree.
And
I
that would
like,
take some of the power away from this realtor organization, which does a lot of good, whether people know it or not, whether people want to admit it or not. The realtor organization fights for private property rights. It fights for you. It fights for me. It fights for our clients, and is really the only entity that fights for private property rights the way that it does. And there's power in the numbers. So I personally wouldn't like to see the three-way agreement go away. A lot of people would, but I think the people that would, many of them don't understand the benefits that come from and what the three-way agreement really does for the power of protecting private property and private property rights. But John mentioned the uncoupling of MLS. That's only in certain states. And there still are major states where if you're not a member of the realtor organization, you cannot access the MLS.
hmm,
Yeah,
all right.
that's an area that I'm sure the DOJ is looking at. And speaking
Yeah,
of
that's,
the DOJ, we
I
haven't
mean,
heard anything from them. I kind of predicted that we'd hear by the end of October, and I was wrong with that prediction. So I'm going out of the prediction business.
like, well, listen, it's not over
Yeah,
yet. But
you're not alone.
hold on. We're talking decoupling, right? So overall, and wouldn't it make sense for, even though I like it, I like the idea of putting everything together. So if we sign up for one, we sign up for all because it's all together. But wouldn't it make sense to kind of just give the option to the agent at this point in the form of saying, hey, look, you don't have to be signed up. Listen, you don't have to pay 3% to the buyer's agent or 2% or whatever percent. I feel like it's along the same lines.
Well, that payment of whatever the percent is, that's totally separate anyway, right? That really has nothing to do. We've gone out of our way over the years to tell people that, the realtor organizations don't specify how much compensation should be paid. And that is an antitrust issue. And that's something we always want to be very cautious about. But I believe that, so real estate's an interesting business, right? And for many people, it's almost like a hobby. For many people, it's a secondary. For many people, it's not the first thing they did. Like I used to tell people when I was a kid, I didn't tell people I want to be a real estate broker when I grow up. It wasn't until I had some other experience doing some other things. And that's the way I think it is for most people. It's a second career. It's a third career. It's typically not a first career for people. And often they get into it with no expectations of where it's going to take them. They don't get the type of training or coaching that they really should have. I know I didn't. When I was first licensed in 1975, I didn't even know what to ask. Broker gave me a desk, put me down in front of a phone,
True.
said if the phone rings, answer the phone. What do I tell them? Right?
Yeah, I
So,
could see that.
so it is one of those types of businesses where there's not a lot of consistency in revenues that people earn or what jobs. And I've always looked at real estate sales itself as an opening to many things that you can do in a wide open career. There's lots of things that you can spend your time and your resources on that are in the real estate space, right? People get into escrow, people get into title, people get into development, people get into commercial or residential, people sell houses, right? There's all kinds of things and opportunities that are available. And some people need to make it's their sole source of revenue. And some people it's an added check every once in a while. And some people refer business out. I mean, it's not as simple as well, there's one thing that we do when we say we're realtors, that means we do this, not necessarily. And so I'm in
So
favor of the three-way agreement. Here in California, you do not have to be a realtor to access the MLS. That's the uncoupling John's talking about. So you want to join the MLS? You don't need to be a realtor. You need to be licensed. But you
yeah,
could join the MLS without joining the realtor organization. And you
gotcha.
can do that in 4 states by law or agreement, and other states voluntarily. And maybe, as John said, the DOJ might jump in and say there should be no connection. If you don't want to be you shouldn't have to be a realtor, a member of the realtor organization, to belong to the MLS. That's
Yeah.
illegal tying.
I
And
agree. I agree 100%.
You know, I
John,
just I just saw a note that came in the chat in which somebody said, "Hey, I just got a offer that came in from somebody independent. They aren't a member of the board." So it's out there in the real world that
that's true.
yeah, you can do business with people. They have to have a state authorized license. That's it.
well, and I always believed that I had a fiduciary duty to the seller to accept an offer from another licensee, even if they weren't a member of the association or a member of the MLS.
Yeah. Well, you have a fiduciary duty to your seller. That's why, right? That's
Right.
where it comes down to.
Sure. So but I remember having buyers that were interested in properties where the listing agents didn't want to take the offer from me.
Yeah, dude, I've experienced that.
Okay.
And I'm like, I started in '04, so it's still an issue. Let me tell you, it's still an issue.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Let me switch over now to what John said. John, you predicted that the DOJ would step in. I still think they'll step in. Here, I want to read something from Housing Wire first, and then you guys tell me what you think. Okay? Can you see my screen, guys? This is Housing Wire. I highlighted it in blue. I'm going to read it to you. It says some believe the second Trump administration will be more pro-business and lighter on enforcement, but Jeff Ehrlich, the former deputy enforcement director for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPD, and they always have something to say, noted earlier this week that in 2020, the last full year of the previous Trump administration, the Bureau brought 48 enforcement actions. So far this year, it has brought only 21. Now, they go on to say, if history is any guide, a second Trump administration might not be as friendly to the industry as many expect, Ehrlich wrote in an email to Housing Wire. What do you guys all think? What's going to happen next? From your experience, John, legally, from your experience, what do you think happens next?
Well, the DOJ is still very, very active. I mean, you remember there was that withdrawal from the settlement? Well, that was in a lawsuit by the DOJ against NAR. They are still pursuing that. As a matter of fact, we discussed here the power that the DOJ has with these administrative subpoenas, those CIDs, and they are now continuing on digging deeper and deeper into the NAR, how they work, who's on the board of directors, what about their meetings, when they had a meeting about clear cooperation, what kind of correspondence went back and forth. So the DOJ is very active there. We were talking about whether or not the DOJ was going to intervene in the Sitzer-Barnett case, and maybe they're just holding back, gathering more information, more ammunition against NAR in the major lawsuit that the DOJ has against NAR.
Got it. Saul, if they don't step in, if the DOJ doesn't step in before the 26th, and they don't give their 2 cents, what's going to happen after? Because I'm pretty sure from all of our talks the previous times, they're not satisfied where everything is. So what happens?
So there's many things that the DOJ could come after the real estate industry for. And one of them we just
That's
discussed,
always been the case. That's
right,
true.
the three-way agreement. Now, this three-way agreement's got nothing to do with Sitzer Burnett or any of these cases, but it's something the DOJ might find of interest. There are other things the DOJ might pursue that they don't like clear cooperation policy, or what we know as mandatory submission. That's not part of the Sitzer Burnett, the settlement's got nothing to do with that.
And they don't like it? You're telling me they don't like it?
They don't, their last indication was they don't like it. However, I want to go back to this idea of, because you have a new administration, might there be some different approach to the real estate industry? And even though in the Housing Wire article there were 48 cases and 21, right, the numbers that you read, the fact is that in 2008, there was a settlement between the Department of Justice and the National Association of Realtors, and it was a 10-year settlement where NAR, and it had to do with virtual office websites, a little bit about IDX, but the DOJ basically stepped out of the life of NAR and realtors for 10 years. And then in 2018, that agreement terminated a 10-year term. And immediately the FTC, the DOJ, and with the help of the Consumer Federation of America, started to hold hearings. And they wanted to demand that NAR do some things because they felt there were big issues. Things like saying buyer services were free when they're not. And so under the Trump administration, his first administration, the DOJ and NAR came to agreement that the DOJ really was suing NAR, and they came to agreement and settled. And then you had a change of administrations, and then the new administration decided to go back to the real estate industry and go back to NAR and say, you know, that deal the previous DOJ made, we don't like it, we're backing out of it.
Yeah.
And so that created some more litigation. NAR sued, said you can't back out. NAR won. A 3-judge panel got involved and said, no, the DOJ has the right to do it. And I think at this point, NAR is appealing that to the Supreme Court, aren't they, John?
Right.
And so what you had is, with the Trump administration, you had an agreement between NAR and the DOJ. And then a new administration came in, and the new administration's DOJ reneged on that. And now you have a new Trump administration coming in. So I can see people who might at least indicate that they think that the DOJ might let up a little bit. Now, we don't know if that's going to be the case. We have no idea. But that's the history of the event, right?
Okay. So, John, what do you think? They're going to come in and do something after and change up some rules by decoupling certain things like the commission or just destroying clear cooperation policy?
Yeah, well, I do think they're going to come in and they're going to take a look at the fact of even in the settlement where it said that you can do things as long as it's off the MLS. In other words, the restrictions are the MLS can't have a rule. I think the DOJ wants to come in and to say nobody can come up with a rule to do anything prior to the actual negotiations between the buyer and the seller at the closing table. That's when they think that the offer of compensation or concessions can be handled. So I think that they'll wait there. When you asked the question, what I thought about was what's going to happen after November 26th, assuming that Judge Bao does give his final approval. Well, the big thing that's going to happen then is the attorneys are going to get paid at that time. That's
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's always the perspective that I look at. They're going to get paid. And the thing is, the payments, I think I recently calculated them to be almost 1/3 of $1 billion is the
Oh, that,
attorney fees. 1/3 of $1 billion in just the Sitzer Burnett case and the consolidated cases they have around that. So that's, to me, is what the big thing that's going to happen now at the November 26th date. Because I
got it.
think that the judge will approve it, unless he is
Okay.
stopped from doing that by the DOJ
Okay.
intervening. Okay.
So I like that. I agree. But here's the challenge I see outside of that piece that you just talked about. I'm seeing something else happen, and I've seen it happen before in the past. And watch, everyone here, pay attention to this because I'm going to show something on my screen. I want you to read the title because Saul and I were at NAR, and it says, "Thank you, Next." Next was the event, NAR. NAR steers clear of clear cooperation at its big event. It's a whole article on this, right? But the point is that it says, hey, they punted it to a different time. And here's my challenge with that, Saul and John and everyone else. They're screwing it up again. It's like, can we just tackle it right now and get it done so that it's not an issue a year later and the Department of Justice or somebody else sues us on it? Let's get it done and get ahead of it way before it's an actual, even bigger issue. Right now, we're already seeing it. It is an issue. Let's just tackle it, get it done. Why does NAR do this? Help me.
Well, I can give you my opinion about it.
That's what I want because I value your opinion and John's.
Well, so NAR has constituencies. And so my experience with NAR and my experience with is over 40 years of experience is that it's not unusual for NAR to shy away from those kinds of decisions that might upset a certain segment of its constituencies. And
Okay.
so you have certain entities that, first of all, CCP is clear cooperation, and clear cooperation is just another name for mandatory submission. And that's a whole nother story. But most realtors that talk against CCP really don't even know that much about it, what it stands for, what it really means, but they hear that maybe you should be against it. Well, NAR's got part of its constituents are in favor of clear cooperation, and part of its constituency is against clear cooperation. So if it takes a position, it's going to alienate certain factions. And so these factions are big. Like, who's the #1 advocate against CCP? I would say it's probably Compass and Robert Refkin. Did you go to the event that he spoke at?
That's my next talk right after you finish. So you can transition into that.
So Robert Refkin, he's against it, and I think he's against it. It's kind of a self-serving approach if you think about it. I think it's ridiculous. I think that watching him up on the panel for the second time this year is he's missing a lot of the points, except he's trying to grow his business. Now, at the same time, you have Redfin and Glenn Kelman and other big constituents of NAR who believe that there's value in clear cooperation. So as NAR is this body that has major players on both sides of the issue, the fact that they might not want to talk about it doesn't surprise me. Back when we went to agency disclosure in the late 1980s, we had a chance to clean up the industry then and avoid the major litigation we have had today, because what we could have done and should have done is we should have written courses on how to list buyers, right? Available with 4 cassettes.
4 cassettes. That cues John with the link. No, I'm just joking.
So you mentioned the new norm, Tristan. We were preaching the new norm many years ago. There's an opportunity for a new norm, a new normal in the way things are done in the industry. And NAR should have done something back then. What they did back then is they created the offer of compensation. Because prior to that, the MLS was a unilateral offer of subagency. It was a subagency model. And so because of agency disclosure and NAR, instead of taking this head on, they created the offer of compensation, which has caused all the trouble lately, right? As a matter of fact, they were so bad about this that you might even know that who are the two agents involved in a real estate transaction? They're the listing agent and the selling agent.
Yep.
We didn't call him a buyer's agent. We called him the listing agent. And talk, how confusing is that? And the
Very.
selling agent. That's because they didn't want to rule out dual agency, which is a whole nother
That's where it came
story.
from. Dude, I was always confused coming in. I'm like, selling, listing. I mean, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm gonna bring up a comment here. Boyd says, when referring back to this right here. By the way, I agree with Boyd. Let me just pop this up. Right here, where we're talking about Robert Refkin saying CCP should go, but this other piece that Zillow will be the national MLS. Boyd says that he wants to get rid of CCP because it's all about money. He wants money. And look, I think it's important. It's really important to cut through the gray area and just tell it for me like it is. Like I'm going directly to how the world works, right? He's watching out for his best interest, his company's best interest. He's a publicly traded company that Compass is. And if you're looking at it with his eyes, the best solution would be get rid of CCP because he controls the majority of those listings. They can double lend them, make more money, make his stockholders more money, and make them happy. So if we look at it that way, there's nothing wrong with that as a capitalist approach, right? But when you're looking at it as a whole, where an industry needs to rely on the ability to put out a listing so that we can share it and not just give us the crap that's out there, so we have the ability to sell homes for our sellers to the best of our ability, that's a detriment. And that's why we're against destroying CCP, even though we don't agree with every piece of it.
Yeah. So somebody mentioned, what is CCP? Well, it's a number of things, but the primary issue is around mandatory submission of your listings. And that's what you're getting at, Tristan. If there's not mandatory submission rules, you're not going to put your good listings in. You're only going to put the ones you can't sell in to an MLS. And then if I'm a big enough broker, I can say, I'm not putting my listings in the MLS. As a matter of fact, I'm going to advertise, come see us because we've got listings you won't find in the MLS.
Right.
And so these big brokerage firms will now get more buyers, and then they'll say, hey, all you agents, come to us because we got buyers. And it gives them an opportunity to grow their agent base. It's not in the best interest, not putting listings into the MLS is not in the best interest of the consumer. The buyer gets to see more property, the seller gets more exposure, the agents have an easier time valuing properties for listings and for buyers. Appraisers have an easier time. The secondary money market can get a better view of what properties are worth, so they know what the loans are worth, so we can get more funding for real estate because it really works. Our market works because of funding. So we've had 100 years to develop this system of MLS, which has all of these values. And one of the things that makes it work, that makes MLS the single source of truth, which brings so much value and gives us a marketplace, and a great advocate of this on that panel was Errol Samuelson. Now, a lot of people don't know who Errol is, but Errol started out with Top Producer, as I recall, many years ago. He worked at Realtor.com, and he's got a very high-level executive position at Zillow. So here we have somebody from Zillow speaking out in favor of the industry. And we had, people applauding Errol. I think they didn't know he was from Zillow.
No, they didn't.
But he was there an advocate. And so the idea that Zillow might become the MLS, that's kind of far-fetched. And even Zillow says that they're not thinking along that line.
Yeah.
And Revkin made another mistake. You heard him mention commissions, right? He had mentioned.
Yeah, well, then they shut him down pretty quick when
they shut him down quick. And then I thought it was kind of interesting when Brian Donlin, who's the CEO for Bright MLS, the second largest MLS in the country, he asks a question to Robert, and Robert gets about 90 seconds into his answer, and then he says, what was the question again? And so he got lost in his own answer.
Well, that's because he has a one-track mind, man. His job is just to make money for Compass finally. And I don't I hate that when we're talking about this stuff out in the open, nobody calls it like it is. It's like, look, Redfin's trying to make money, Zillow's trying to make money, everyone's trying to make money. And we hide behind the fact that doing this is going to be good for everyone, or doing that is going to be good for everyone. And that's what upsets me, because you have the three of us, and I'm sure a lot of other people here that are listening in that actually care about this industry. And it's not about the money. It's about what happens after we're gone. How is this going to function for the best of the industry as a whole?
You know,
Yeah.
Tristan, I've been thinking about your basic question, which is why doesn't NAR act faster
Yeah.
on these issues? And I have one word for that. It's called delay. Delay. They look at making a decision here. It's best maybe to delay it and put it off. And I think that's what really bothers you and bugs you and other people. We know what the issues are. There should be a decision, but what do we get instead? Delay. Just like they have with all the extension of the DOJ cases. Every tactic that they used was to delay further decision.
Is that now, John, legally, right? Because you were an attorney for a while and you were in this world. Is that an official strategy? Like delay?
Well, if I'm getting paid by the hour, it is.
So it goes back down to money. Got it.
I'm only kidding. I never really practiced that much. My job was more in real estate education and
I remember.
and training with people getting their real estate license.
Yeah, that's so funny. But yeah, Saul, what do you think about delay in general? Is that a good strategy? Should they be playing that same thing again?
See, I don't think it's a good strategy, but I understand that it is a strategy,
Yeah, well,
right? And,
yeah. Well, duck and cover and hide your head under the ground is
yeah,
still.
to me, it goes back to the diverse constituencies of NAR. And so they're just overly cautious at times as to the position they take because of who it might offend. And so again, they're always conscious of that. It's not unusual. And where this ends up, your guess is as good as mine. And I hope that we don't destroy the mandatory submission rule, which creates this marketplace, this amazing marketplace where real estate is almost a liquid asset.
It is.
Put your property on the market and get your cash and put it in your pocket in less than 30 days. That's amazing. And it's not that way in the rest of the world. And the rest of the world really would kind of like to have what we have. So I can go out and buy property, and if I decide I want to sell it, I can put it on the market. I can dispose of it right away. And what that does, it reduces risk. What that does is it makes more people willing to fund. And right now we've got, the major funder are the GSEs, right? Fannie and Freddie, but they don't have to be. There's plenty of money on the sideline, private money that would love to get into the real estate lending space if there were ways that we could eliminate some of the risk and create greater transparency. So I see a great future for buying and selling real estate as we move forward. And we need to do everything we can to protect this marketplace where everybody puts their listings in. I'll share my good with my bad. Everybody shares their good with their bad. It's more transparent. Everybody benefit. And people that say that, my seller, this is what Revkin says, my seller should have the right not to put it in the MLS. Why?
They already have that right, don't they?
Well, they do have that right, but why? What benefit would come from a seller? Now, there are some sellers that for some reasons might benefit from that, but for the most part, most homes in the United States, sellers benefit by more exposure. I mean, that's like a given. Exposure sells real estate. Because if it didn't, why do your sellers want it on Zillow? Why do sellers want their listings on Zillow?
Yeah.
They want because they think people go to Zillow and look for the properties. How do the listings get to Zillow? Zillow gets them from the MLSs. That's where they get it. They get the data from the MLSs. So people that say, well, the seller doesn't want their listing in the MLS, that's like saying the seller doesn't want their listing on Zillow then. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find many sellers, because we say this, we run into realtors all the time and say, I hate Zillow. I can't stand them. They're a terrible company. Well, then how come you put your listings there? Because you don't have to put them there. Well, my seller insists.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
That
So,
makes sense too.
and I don't hate Zillow. I'm just saying that you got people that think, but people want exposure. Sellers want exposure. If
Yeah.
they didn't want it, so here's Refkin saying sellers should have the choice not to have exposure. What a bunch of baloney.
I agree. Dude, and I call it straight too. I'm like, listen, it's just a money play. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it comes down to. And that, of course, that's my opinion. So, guys, let's see what happens. What are we? November 12th today. We meet up we meet up right before the 26th. Wait,
Yeah.
do we meet on the 26th? Wait,
Right
what day?
before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, what date are we meeting? Let me just check because it might be like on that date. Oh, we meet on the 26th.
All
That's
right.
that's the day we meet. So on the 26th, we'll be talking about whether or not the DOJ stepped in and what happens. Holy crap. That's awesome. All right, everyone, let's see what questions you have for then. Feel free to email us or reach out to us. Reach out to John, Saul, and also let me put up the link to the Data Advocate because I know we've had quite a few great articles that have been put there.
Yeah,
John,
one of the great articles featured the graphic that you shared with the real estate industry, which I thought was an excellent piece to break the news to the new buyers under what you call the new landscape in the real
thanks.
estate professional.
I
Excellent
appreciate
article.
that. Thanks. And then I put that one on there. John does an amazing job keeping us updated as well as Saul. They put a lot of work into this. And I actually probably only do one article maybe every month, maybe. It's these guys that do all the heavy lifting. So there it is, the Data Advocate. Also tune in 2 weeks from now and we'll keep you updated as to what's happening with the DOJ and
Someone asked, what's on the 26th? Well, so go ahead, Tristan, you can explain.
no,
what
no,
it-
you go ahead, buddy.
So there has been this, we're all operating under a proposed settlement. The NAR proposed settlement. And if there are no objections, the judge probably will finalize that proposed settlement, and the date for that is November 26th. So if we don't hear from the DOJ on this by November 26th, that means they're not weighing in on it.
That's it. And I think people have missed it. So it'll be interesting to see, man. I'm very excited either way. Change is a good thing because there's always opportunity in it. Well, when they object. There you go. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Happy November, John, Saul. Thanks for doing this.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
Our
great to
pleasure.
see you. Take care.